Originally released back in 2010, Nier was a cult classic game directed by Yoko Taro, taking more inspiration from titles like The Legend of Zelda as opposed to Dynasty Warriors and Ace Combat being the gameplay origin for his earlier Drakengard series. Whilst this wasn't quite his breakout hit, that'll come later, I remember whispers of this weird, interesting little game with a really rich story, but not much more beyond that. My belief was that this was partly to blame on the weird Japan can't make good games anymore, quote unquote, sentiment that the Western game industry seemed to have around this time. The game is loosely connected to Taro's Drakengard series and was made between the second and third entry, so why have I covered Drakengard 3 first over this game? That's because 11 years later, the game received the snappily titled remaster, Nier Replicant version 1.22474487139. That's the last time I'll call it by its full title. I'll just be calling it Nier Replicant or just Nier from now on. And this remaster improves the gameplay substantially, adds content that didn't make the original cut, and unifies the main character. I'll explain that, the Drakengard connection, the game's title, and more throughout the video, so let's dive into what Nier Replicant is all about.
Hidden so deep in veils of deceit, imprisoned in twisting spells, are we the plaything of fiends, or merely the dreams that we're fighting in vain, fighting in
Just like I did with the Drakengard videos, I just want to give a quick little content warning that this game does contain some themes that people might find distressing. There's nothing super gratuitous, but I just wanted to give a quick warning all the same. But for those who are comfortable with it, please stick around, and I hope you enjoy the video. Here we go. Like most RPGs, we get asked to enter our name off the bat. I used to just put my normal name in as a kid, but as I've gotten older, I generally prefer to put like the quote-unquote canon name of the protagonist in. But the protagonist doesn't have a canon name, but for extended and marketing material other than hero or protagonist, he's just been referred to as Nier, so that's what I'll be calling him. The game begins in a derelict snowy town in the summer of 2053 in Tokyo. Strange weather aside, we see a hooded boy being tempted to use a book with a face beside him, and it doesn't take long to find out what he's been running from, these blob creatures. He fends them off with only a metal pipe to defend himself, and we soon learn he's been protecting his ill sister, Yona, who he warns not to touch the creepy book. It doesn't take long for him to be overrun when he decides to do what he just told his sister not to, and grabs the aforementioned spooky book, suddenly gaining immense power. This is both reflected in the gameplay and serves as a tutorial on the combat. Nier levels up and gets new abilities like every 5 seconds here, and after taking out a frankly ludicrous amount of enemies, he checks back in on Yona, sharing a sweet moment at where she tries to give him a cookie, but her illness seems to get the best of her, further brought on after touching the book herself. The game pans out on Nier screaming for help.
Somebody, we need help! Help us!
And we cut to 1,412 years later. That's a weirdly specific amount of time, but alright. Where we meet Nier and Yona. Eh? How?
Alright, I'm heading out.
The pair now seem to live in this very Zelda-esque fantasy village, very different from the scenery we were just in, but this is the setting that will be present for the remainder of the game. Nier heads to the nearby library and speaks to Popola and her twin Devila, who essentially run the village and act as motherly or big sisterly figures to Nier and Yona. Her and the other villagers often give Nier odd little jobs to do so he can make a bit of money, as he lives alone with his sister and constantly has to buy medicine and painkillers for her. Those monsters from before are still lurking about, being named Shades since direct sunlight hurts them. Once we deliver the goods requested, Nier returns home to Yona and it cuts to the next day. This seems to be their usual routine, Nier going out and finding whatever job he can do for as much money as he can get, all for his sister. It's sad this responsibility has fallen onto him as he's also a young kid too. Later on in the day, Nier discovers Yona's gone missing. She's made her way over to the nearby Lost Shrine in search of a legendary flower known as a Lunatear, which is said to make the owner of one insanely rich, so she's trying to find one to ease her brother's financial burdens. Inside the Lost Shrine, we find a returning Yoko Taro staple, collectible weapons. We'll find all sorts of swords to wield during the game's runtime though. It doesn't take too long to find Yona, who's guarded by Shades in these two suits of armour holding a different, weird-looking book in place. The boy eventually breaks the seal.
For the love of all that is holy, would you please stop pounding me? You stand in the presence of ancient wisdom.
And introduces us to Grimoire Weiss, a very pompous book and one of my favourite characters, who's suffering from a bad case of amnesia. With his help, the two armoured beings are quickly beaten and Yona's rescued, but not without some awful news. She's contracted an incurable, fatal disease called the Black Scroll. Popola and Devila seem to know of Weiss, though, as he's part of an ancient legend. A black book, Grimoire Noir, will appear to spread death and disease, and with the power of something called the Sealed Verses, Grimoire Weiss will bring peace to the land. Our goal as the player soon becomes clear: obtain the Sealed Verses and save Yona. So I said that I was going to explain why Nier Replicant version 1.22, etc. had that title, so I'm going to follow through and explain it now. It's essentially because that number is the square root of 1.5, because according to Yoko Taro, it's something between a remaster and like a remake. Like, it's not completely remade from the ground up, but it's not just like a remastered or like port with like HD textures or what, or not HD textures, because I think it came out in HD because it was the PS3 era with improved textures and all that stuff. So that's why it has that stupidly long title. After picking up a side quest on the way, which is gonna go on to be a very big recurring theme in my footage, these package ones are probably the most annoying to do because any hit or even rolling will destroy it entirely. Awkwardly air dashing is the only way to get around quickly when doing these, but anyway, we make it to the Eyrie, a society of people living on the side of these cliffs that refuse to go outside their homes unless absolutely necessary. We get to deliver the package outside their door, but we can't do anything else here, so we have to return back to the village. When heading back, we spot a little hut with a flower crown made up of Lunatears, but it and the hut belong to someone. This is Kaine, and she doesn't take kindly to surprise guests. During the fight between Nier and Kaine, this disgusting, either multi-chinned or multi-titted shade interrupts. I don't know which one it is, and I don't know which one is worse. So Nier and Kaine, who the latter happens to be part shade somehow, work together to take it down. But the battle results in her passing out, where Nier takes her back to her hut and waits until she recovers, but she urges Nier and Weiss to leave her alone. Yona's pain is getting increasingly worse, so Popola suggests that they head to a new area, Seafront, to get a shaman fish that is said to have had properties that helps with pain relief, but not before getting some more side quests out of the way. Along the way to Seafront, we find a villager under attack by Shades, but much larger and carrying weaponry here, but he does give us a sword for our trouble. Seafront is an honestly charming little seaside town. We look all over, but nobody is selling the fish we need, but an old man kindly explains that they're easy to catch, and gives us a rod and lure introducing the fishing mechanic, a seemingly must-have in a JRPG. It's pretty simple but serviceable, just putting the control stick in the opposite direction that the lure is in until the meter goes down. The best part of Seafront though? The fat seals. I love them, they're iconic. And speaking of iconic, this old woman who can even give Weiss a verbal beatdown asks us to go to the post office for her to tell them to give her mail. Her energy really reminds me of the worst kinds of people in retail. It turns out that the postman hurt his leg, so Nier kindly offers to deliver the mail for the old lady at Popola in his stead. And Weiss being so fed up with it all is very amusing. Plus, the theme for the postman / post office is elite. Getting back to the village showcases the first truly interesting side quest in my view. An old man asks us to look for his dog, Max, who usually runs around the northern fields. However, it's been a day and he still hasn't come back yet. When Nier finds him, he's sadly passed away, holding a leaf in his mouth. And when Nier returns to deliver the grim news, he finds the old man's grandson. His granddad's heart gave out while we were gone, and it turns out the leaf that his dog was holding was used for his heart medication. A really tragic, but really sweet story. And in contrast to that, we need to convince Devila to sing with her sister, but she needs a specific drink from Seafront to sesh on before she'll sing. The fish we caught seems to have done wonders for Yona, but the letter we delivered to Popola tells of more shades at the Eyrie. But given our weapon was useless, we need to go to the junk heap first to upgrade it. One cool detail I really like is very rarely instead of Yona's diary entries as the loading screen, it has these reports. For example, this one talking about the damage done after the fall of something called the Wall of Jericho. I have to say, the side quest where Nier has to get ingredients for Yona to make stew was adorable. She can't really cook, but she puts a lot of effort in and he doesn't want to put his little sister down. Finally, a healthy sibling relationship in a Yoko Taro game. Doesn't tend to be very often, so take solace in this rare blessing we have. Free, I take notes, you freak. When we make it to the junk heap, we come across a pair of brothers, Jacob and Gideon. Their mom has been gone for a week and they need decent material to upgrade weapons, but it's been getting more dangerous for them to venture into the junk heap, so Nier naturally volunteers to go. The latter was easy enough to find, but the former, not so much. After a very Zelda-esque boss where we have to throw bombs in its mouth, Nier discovers the body of the mother, and beside her, a man, with her bag packed with clothes, perfume, and cash, and we have the option of telling the brothers the truth or saying she wasn't there. There's no correct answer, but I think telling them the truth is the best choice. Objectively, the mom is a piece of shit, actively neglecting her kids and attempting to abandon them to run off with some fella, but the news is obviously crushing all the same, and Jacob takes some solace that she was with someone she loved at the end. I have to say, with Jacob being so concerned and looking after his brother in the way he does, I can see a sort of parallel in their relationship with Nier and Yona. At the Eyrie, the giant shade that we found before, Hook, has been running rampant, and Kaine isn't far behind, so of course we help her take it down. During the fight though, it's revealed why she hates this shade in particular so much. It's responsible for the death of her grandma, the creature going so far as to mimic her voice while making Kaine hallucinate. This doesn't work for long though, and the combined effort of Nier, Weiss and Kaine manage to overcome the threat. At first, Kaine seems satisfied to be joining her grandma after getting her revenge. However, Nier, rather sweetly, convinces her to join him as a friend and travelling companion. Once she joins the party, she tells of another land who are working on finding a cure for the Black Scroll by the name of Facade, since their king has fallen ill. Facade is a pretty unusual place, governed by literally hundreds of thousands of rules the citizens need to follow, but a girl named Freya helps the group navigate around the city. The king has already passed, but his son, the prince next in line, has gone missing in a temple they're not allowed to enter. However, this rule only applies to the citizens of Facade. Outsiders are able to enter, and it was pretty clear at the Junk Heap with the boss, but the temple is by far the most obvious sign of 3D Zelda's inspiration. Rooms where you have to perform specific acts, a boss at the end, and this little Easter egg. We've got more side quests, and a standout is an extended story with the Lighthouse Woman. After doing some odd jobs for her, we bump into her at the post office, with her wanting to go visit her lover who lives far away. However, she's being denied at every turn, and after some investigating, Nier discovers her lover died many years ago, and with the help of the town to keep the lie going, the postman has been writing letters himself pretending like nothing's wrong. But now the woman has the black scroll, and it's up to the player to decide to reveal the painful truth or continue the lie. I decided to tell her the truth, and it turns out she always knew deep down that she wasn't writing to him, but asks that we keep our conversation private, since all the townsfolk did this with well-meaning intentions. Nier spends an evening with his sister, and after a strange dream and an equally strange letter that Popola gets the next day, he heads to the Forest of Myth in the north for the next sealed verse. This section is completely dedicated to a visual novel-esque segment, and I remember not really liking it my first time, but the vivid descriptions and the breathtaking soundtrack really sold me on it here. After some shenanigans with a dude with a red bag having a mishap with his wife, causing construction on a canal in the village to get delayed, Yona asks her brother for a favour. She's got a pen pal who's in need of help, and for whatever reason she says Weiss and Nier are the only ones that can do it. Guess we're finally gonna find out who lives at the giant mansion near Seafront. Said mansion is a massive love letter to classic Resident Evil, or I guess it would be Sweet Home / Alone in the Dark. Classic Resident Evil works for this comparison, with it being a spooky looking mansion with fixed camera angles, and Kaine immediately going for a kip in this really spooky setting was very funny to me. She ends up going missing, and we meet Emil, the owner of the mansion. It turns out his butler was the one sending the letters under his master's name, requesting help from Nier, but Yona managed to get the letters first and thought she had a pen pal. Nier, being the good lad he is, agrees to assist, with the potential cure for Emil's blindness in a room overrun by shades. It ends up being a book very similar looking to Vice, named Grimoire Rubrin, which I don't believe is actually ever said in-game. I think this information is only in supplemental material, which might be worth doing a video on the supplemental material of Nier. Please, let me know if you guys would like to see that.
Aren't we clever? As if any mere tome could compare to the wonderment that is Grimoire Vice.
And after all said and done, Kaine and Emil share this very tender moment, since she can relate to his feelings of his eyesight being capable of petrification as a curse, given she's part shade. It's the most open and vulnerable we've seen of her so far, and honestly one of my favourite scenes in the entire game. Nier has all the sealed verses now, and all they have to do is track down Grimoire Noir. Things just can't be that easy though, and a short time later, Emil stumbles into the village to warn them of incoming shades. And after another report loading screen mentioning something called White Chlorination Syndrome, Nier has to contend with a gigantic shade. To be honest, Nier does admirably holding it off with just him and Vice, but with Kaine coming in clutch, they manage to destroy the beast. But not for long. It regenerates and joins with the other shades, and eventually a shadowy doppelganger of Nier with a black book, the aforementioned Grimoire Noir. It incapacitates Vice and Nier and reveals to the former that they're meant to be fused together to, in Noir's own words, unleash shades onto the world. However, Vice is pulled out of the spell by Kaine in the only way she can.
Become one.
Vice, you dumbass!
Kaine.
Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry! Maybe I'll rip your pages out one by one, or maybe I'll put you in the goddamn furnace! How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord! Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord! Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
For the last time, my name is Grimoire Weiss, and it is not to be abbreviated.
Vice!
Vice!
Good to see you, Kaine. Although I don't think anyone has ever accused me of being a little bitch before.
The group put up a good fight, but they aren't able to overcome the sheer power of Noir and the Shadow Lord, what the shadowy doppelgang of Nier will be called from now on. He makes off with Yona, severely wounds Nier, and to stop the regenerating shade, Emil has to follow through with what Kaine whispered to him, petrifying her, and by extension the door she was holding closed to keep the creature at bay, ending this section of the game on a massively low note for the characters. Not for the game itself, mind you, this is all great stuff in my opinion. Cut to 5 years later, and Nier is now an adult, understandably hell-bent on cutting down shades. We get a quick gameplay tutorial since now he is an adult, he has a lot more weapons to choose from. There is some good news though. Emil writes a letter saying that he's stumbled across something that might be able to save Kaine, so heading over to his mansion is obviously going to be our first priority, right? Nah, I'm just kidding, it's side quests. When we're done and arrive at the mansion, we discover a very modern, tech-looking basement. The gameplay is in a style very reminiscent to things like Hotline Miami or Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes, with the slightly angled top-down camera. Holy shit, look at the date, that genuinely gave me a little fright. I don't know why, but it did. I'll get into the particulars later into the video, but it's clear that Emil's powers are due to being experimented on, and the mansion above ground was to cover up whatever was taking place here. The further we head down, the more Emil seems to be having negative reactions. We end up finding a gigantic monster chained up, and in order to get the magic that Emil needs to free Kaine, he has to fuse with it. A long-awaited reunion, as it turns out that this creature is his sister, Halua, once an ordinary child, turned into this after being experimented on, with that experimentation turning on Emil so he could seal her when she grew too dangerous. Since Emil's largely resistant to magic, we have to rely on Vice since any melee attack would risk hurting him. Once the fight's over, we get another one of my favourite scenes in the game, shifted into this iconic skeletal form with just this grimacing face Halua had, and while Emil's horrified at this new form and how others will react to him, Nier just gently embraces him. Emil now has the magic needed to free Kaine, immediately transitioning over to the library in order to free her, and by extension, the shade that they trapped. And back to back, another one of my favourite scenes, Kaine immediately knowing who Emil is, and her reaction to the now adult Nier, although the Gestalt version where you play as Father Nier is really fucking funny.
Welcome back, Kaine.
Wow, you grew up.
Good to see you, Kaine.
You look like shit.
I should probably explain what I mean by that. So, when the game originally released in 2010, I mentioned at the start of the video that there was kind of a Japanese games don't sell in the West mentality going on, and during the development of Nier, they were worried that the game wouldn't sell overseas because they didn't want to play as this younger, I guess more effeminate / androgynous kind of design of a protagonist. They wouldn't connect with Brother Nier. So as a compromise, the team created this older man who we call Father Nier because instead of a brother and a sister relationship, it's a father and a daughter. Everything else is pretty much exactly the same, just bar the difference in the protagonist that you play as. And in Japan, the PS3 version was called the Replicant version since you played as the brother, and the Xbox 360 version was called the Gestalt version since you still played as the father there. Whereas overseas, we just got Nier, and it was solely the father until the remaster kind of cemented that the brother is the main character. And I think the dynamic of them works a lot better than it does a father and a daughter. Just the whole relationship dynamics he has with pretty much every character works a lot better as a younger man than it does with an older guy, especially with some of the lines he says about friendship and stuff. Speaking of, the reaction of brother and father Nier after the reveal that the villagers want Kaine and Emil sleeping outside despite all they've done for them is quite surprising. Brother Nier expresses frustration and doubt. Father Nier is genuinely considering killing Poplar and Deviler out of sheer outrage. The group finds some possible intel on the Shadow Lord being in the Lost Shrine, and I really like that the follow-up dialogue on how Nier feels awful about Kaine and Emil having to sleep outside, ending with this great bit of dialogue with Kaine.
Besides, I like camping with Kaine. Sometimes we sit around the fire and tell stories, or roast...
Emil, that's enough. I got a fucking image to maintain.
I just love the bond between Emil and Kaine. It's so sweet, man. We have a boss against the second Stone Guardian, a really easy fight, but I think it's meant to showcase Nier's growth since the start of the game. Although the battle does result in Kaine accidentally being skewered, causing the shade in her to overtake her body, and we get a boss fight with this feral version of her. Emil and Nier manage to stop the transformation and pick up some sort of key, 1 out of 5, and we know the location of the next two, the Junk Keep and the Forest of Myth. The player gets to pick which one they go after first, and it doesn't really make a difference in the overall story, but I picked the Junk Keep as a good chunk of side quests rely on getting materials common over there. After a side quest involving taking down a stupidly tanky shade and quite a bit of fishing, we go to the Junk Keep. We get a flashback of the two brothers, Jacob and Gideon, exploring, only for the older brother, Jacob, to be crushed by the debris, with a robot ominously watching Gideon suffering. Now older, he doesn't know anything about the larger shades that Nier is looking for, and only really cares about destroying robots. You can tell even now from the excellent voice acting that something's off with him, just broken, which is understandable after what we just saw. I went through pretty much every single room in the Junk Keep and destroyed every robot since a lot of side quests I had active relied on drops found here, and even after going through that, I still didn't have enough, which was really annoying. I decided to mostly stick to side quest related stuff for a while, including this really strange one where we have to take out an especially durable shade, just trying to read stuff in Emil's mansion. But as we progress, we learn the red bag guy has gone missing. None of his friends or family seem to know where he is, and the postman, as well as a young girl, is nowhere to be found either. It all culminating into the newest addition to Seafront, a gigantic wrecked ship. And with no other option, the gang investigate the shipwrecked vessel. This is actually something brand new to the Replicant Remaster, being cut content from the original game that was adapted into a short story sometime later, and it does an excellent job in building up a creeping feeling of dread with the discovery that the ship belonged to slavers, the items they'd used to torture said slaves, the weird honking noise replacing the music, and the sudden reveal of the bodies below deck, explaining where the missing townspeople had gone, the ferryman included. Once we reach the final room, we find the little girl that Nier lost track of when he first entered the ship, seeming to be scared until the postman walks in and explains he's been taking care of her as she won't leave the ship on her own, only for us to discover that she's a shade. With the postman mistaking the blood in the room to her having her time of the month, so he didn't know that she was connected to all the people going missing. She emerges from the shipwreck in the form of a massive shade tentacles, being by far the strongest thing the group have encountered since the Shadow Lord, as she seems completely unaffected by the sun, unlike most shades, as the healing factor she has outpaces any damage that the sun can do to her. Nier manages to knock its head clean off, but that only seems to just piss it off, growing far larger than even the ship. All the while, this absolute banger, Fleeting Words, has been playing in the background.
Oh hell, that thing's huge.
The The group's best just isn't enough to overcome the creature though, and just before it finishes everyone off, it gets distracted by the postman, who the Shade seems to value in some way, allowing Nier to get another headshot in against it, finally putting an end to the gigantic monster. But of course, we have to break the news to the bad guy's wife. The player gets the option to lie to her or break the news truthfully, and my personal opinion is, even if it's tragic, it's not right to be dishonest about what happened. I just realised the side quest with him getting something for his wife is impossible to do now, which is kind of fitting, a literal lingering memory of him directly through the game mechanics. Unintentional on my part, but poetic in a weird kind of way. But to offset the bad news, we've got some good. The side quest in Emil's mansion sheds more light on a researcher from hundreds of years ago, one of the few who treated him and his sister kindly, with Emil coming to view her as a motherly figure. Plus, the King of Facade is getting married, and the gang are all invited, so Facade is obviously the place to be. Of course, the prince, now king's blushing bride, is Fura, the woman who guided us to the temple in Facade way back when. The group stay in the prince's mansion for the night, and where's my Emil, Nier, Vice, and King of Facade stag do side quest? Like, come on. Hello? Yoko Taro, get your head in the game, please. We also get a small but extremely important scene for Emil's character.
I'm sorta jealous. I wish I was Fira.
You'll find a nice bride someday, Emil.
Huh? Oh, right. Bride.
You must be tired indeed if you misunderstood that simple social nicety.
Yeah, that's not exactly it.
This interaction is a confirmation that Emil's gay, something confirmed by Yoko Taro himself. And the point that it went above the know-it-all Vice's head is a very amusing touch. The marriage celebration is very sweet, but it's sadly cut short by wolves attacking the town, Fura getting the way of the attack on the king that proved to be fatal. The king is dead set on fully wiping out the wolves out, however his advisor is quick to remind him his responsibility is to his people, and his wife wouldn't want him to be consumed by his anger. We can decide to aid him right away, but I decided to head over to the Forest of Myths, since one of the side quests I've got requires going over there. We have another visual novel-esque segment going over seemingly random events. A young, sickly boy wasting away from disease alone, a lone swordswoman losing herself to insanity after the deaths of her comrades and the futility of her battle, and, apparently a favourite of the tree, a red dragon falling from the heavens. Nier and Vice are introduced into the story, spotting a shade eating the remains of the tree's memories, and after answering some questions relating to the stories, Nier gets the next fragment. And after that really eerie sequence, the tension's broken up, unintentionally on my part just to be clear, by this really funny cutscene of Kaine loving the berries we found as part of the side quest I mentioned, making Nier curious enough to taste them, only for him to immediately pass out as they are indeed extremely poisonous. We get an antidote to give to the sick kid back in the village, but Kaine just shrugs off the poison. That's the epitome of girl boss, honestly, just ignoring poison. Popola gives the party more clues on the Shadow Lord, with a letter from the Ares chief of all places deciding to open up trade to the outside world, as well as claiming one of the citizens as information on the next key, which, as Vice points out, is wildly convenient. As it turns out, this was a ruse, Shades possessing the villagers and launching a surprise attack on the party, and this Kaine cutscene always confused me just a little bit, but I think the intention is the sight of a child grieving the immediate loss of a loved one, Shade possession or not, and being called a monster brought her back to the incident with her grandma, which lets the Shade get a good hit on her. They eventually merge into this big blob of consciousness, with Emil ending the fight by unleashing a gigantic amount of energy, taking out the Shade, but completely obliterating the area in the process. Understandably, he's distraught at the amount of innocent people caught in the crossfire, but Nier completely shrugs it off, part of her trying to console Emil by telling him that he saved their lives, but also I think part of it is he finds eliminating Shades a bigger priority now, and that's honestly a little bit disturbing. He just tells everyone, including himself, not to look back, and yeah, they never do. You can't even really visit the area anymore. It's physically wiped off of the map. Like, you can only go as far as Kaine's hut, really, before there's just where the bridge would be and just a big gap of open air. Moving on to the next key fragment, we head back to the Junk Heap. Gideon has a new sword ready for us, the Iron Will, but asks us for a favour. For Nier to avenge his brother, as the robot that ended his brother's life has apparently teamed up with a Shade, and that's all Nier needs to hear to comply. We're up against the boss now, and it's quite a pushover, even attempting to escape at the end, only for it to come crashing back down. Gideon enters when the fight is done, just wailing on the destroyed machine for an honestly uncomfortable amount of time. He doesn't actually stop until you physically go up to him and try a couple of times to get his attention to stop him. I think this keeps up the parallel between Nier and Yona and the Brothers of the Junk Heap, because Nier's obviously a lot more set on destroying Shades. In Section 1 it was more just kind of, if they got in the way then he's defending himself, but in Part 2 he's definitely enjoying the sensation of killing Shades, and he's not really attempting to hide it at this point. He's not as far gone as Gideon is with his hatred of robots, but the parallels are still there. It feels like he's a dark reflection on what Nier could turn into. Before I move on to the fragment and facade, I got a more side quests out the way, involving quite a bit of grinding for items, but it was worth it for one of my favourites, the Despicable Man, a guy bouncing from town to town just being an absolute homewrecker, and the gang's thoughts about it are some of the best dialogue in the game.
He simply hops from one woman to the next, does he not?
He's been cheating this whole time? That's just terrible.
Doubtless he will end up suffering at the hands of one of his paramours sooner or later.
I don't think he means any harm. This kind of thing just happens with attractive guys.
That's awful! What if a man did that to you, Kaine?
He'd wake up a little less man than he used to be.
Changed my mind. Cheating is always wrong.
Turns out he was actually the bloke we found beside the Junk Heap brothers' mum near the start of the game, a twist that seems so obvious in retrospect, yet I didn't see coming at all when playing. Another interesting one being about a Shade spotted around town, with some claiming it's been seen with a child. The kid in question tries to lie about its location, and when you do stumble across it, it doesn't attack. It seems more curious than anything, just hopping around you. But it's a Shade all the same, so as far as Nier is concerned, it's got to be put down. On another note, it's here I finally cleared all of the fishing quests, and when you go back to report the good news at Seafront, you learn the old man passed away that very morning, something I had a sneaking feeling would happen given the track record of how a lot of these quests have gone. But he was apparently a pretty isolated guy, being shunned by the residents for having allegedly done some terrible things in his younger years as a mercenary, but his antics with Nier seem to have made his final years a bit brighter. That's enough punning it off, though. We've got some wolves to take care of. The boss is just a case of spamming normal wolves at the player in the desert until the Shade leader decides to come down, but he's a pushover. However, it's the last of the fragments collected, and with a few more side quests out the way, it's time to finally take on the Shadow Lord, back where it all began in the Lost Shrine. The group wander into a pristine-looking garden where Weiss has to talk to some birds, working as some sort of mechanism or riddle in order to progress.
The hell is this?
I believe this is some manner of password.
Password?
Yes. The correct answer should grant us access to the castle. I feel confident I've heard this somewhere before.
To whom does the truth? To whom I ask, why did humans disappear from the world? You must answer.
I answer because of a black disease.
I ask, how can humans extend their lives?
I answer by separating body from soul.
I ask, what is the destination of souls?
I answer, they are placed in their corresponding shells.
Very well. You are acknowledged as master. You may enter.
Well then, it seems the way is open.
And inside lies Deviler and Popola? They initially try, albeit poorly, to convince Nier to turn back, but with his sister so close, that's obviously not going to happen, resulting in a fight, with them aligning with the Shadow Lord and calling Weiss a traitor, taking portions of his power. Nier, Kaine, Weiss, and Emil fight off a massive group of shades, including a bunch of shade blobs in this dance hall, with them eventually combining to take the form of this relentless shade bull. But the king and the masked soldiers come in clutch to hold them off while the main group go on ahead, and everyone puts a stellar performance all throughout the game, but you can really feel Nier's heartbreak at the betrayal of the two women who essentially raised him and the sacrifice of his friend in the king. Ray Chase knocked it out of the park here. Deviler and Popola now finally explain some of what's really going on. Shades aren't just random monsters. They're the true form of humanity now. The twins are androids and were created to watch over them until they were ready to enter back into regular bodies. And Nier, as well as everyone else we've come across over the course of the game, are said bodies, named replicants. The in and outs of this I'll discuss soon, but that's the TLDR version of Project Gestalt. Another fight ensues, resulting in Deviler being fatally wounded, and I get Popola's grief, but they did attack the group first. This is textbook self-defense in my opinion. She seems impossible to overcome now she's fully given into her despair, but Emil splits off from the crew, sacrificing himself by turning into what I can only describe as a miniature black hole to defeat Popola. This understandably breaks the two until Kaine forcefully snaps Nier out of it, and I mean forcefully. The way I took this scene was as a bizarre display of affection from her. Those writing thirsty as fuck comments about wanting to be beat up by Kaine right now, pack it in. Stop. I see you. But she was way closer to Emil than Nier was, and I took this as her way of saying, Emil trusted you to get this done, don't fuck it up. The Shadow Lord looms over a sleeping Yona, with her waking up partway through the fight, initially seeming like she's speaking to Nier when she says she wants this fighting to stop, but it's quickly shown that her Gestalt and Replicant have merged, the former talking with the Shadow Lord, confirming that this is indeed the Gestalt of the Nier we know. Yona can hear her Replicant constantly crying out for her brother, and she doesn't want to live in a body that's causing another girl to suffer, walking into the light and willingly giving up her body for her Replicant counterpart. This completely breaks the Shadow Lord, who's now barely putting up a fight against us. Nier does show a moment's hesitation, likely very much seeing himself in him, which makes sense considering he literally is, but still cuts the Shadow Lord down, ending the game on Yona and Nier looking to the bright horizon, Kaine going off on her own, and Gestalt Nier and Yona together in the afterlife. Except wrong, that's ending A, and like the previous Yoko Taro games, Nier has multiple endings, so let's see what ending B's got to offer. Route B is used to go more in depth on characters outside of Nier himself. For example, before Kaine is turned back from stone, we get a dream that she's having centered all around her past, beginning with the abuse she suffered at the hands of her fellow villagers in the area. This is way before her shade possession, so the reason why she was considered a monster was due to her nature of being intersex, only to be saved by her grandma and enjoying the humble, love-filled life with her, only for that to be cruelly ripped away by the giant shade Hook, to her initial possession by a particularly hateful shade called Taran. Like, the writing for this dude is excessively edgy. The guy's just a freak. We also get this adorable scene of Kaime and Emil camping outside together that was never shown in Route A, plus an entirely new interactable object at Nier's home, his mother's diary, allowing the player to access the World of the Recycled Vessel, which was DLC in the original 2010 release, but is just a part of the base game here. You play as Father Nier, or back in the day Brother Nier in the original Gestalt release, being the only chance to control the respective versions of Nier in each entry. It's purely combat with some funky little remixes of familiar Nier tracks that give weapons as rewards, with the diary entries themselves giving a first-hand account of succumbing to the disease and slowly losing yourself, spelling out some lore implications pretty blatantly in the process. Speaking of, while we've got some footage of Papa Nier that I'll have no other chance to use, let's take this time to go over that explanation I promised. So, the final boss of Drakengard 1 in its last ending, Ending E, depicted Kaim, Angelus, and the Queen Beast falling into real-world Tokyo in 2003. The battle played exactly as it did in that game in the Nier timeline, except we get more information on everyone around the area hearing the song that the Queen Beast was singing during the boss fight, the bell noise. That's exactly what the citizens of Shinjuku heard. After the boss plays out and the Queen Beast dies, Kaim and Angelus were shot down by the Japanese military, just as the same as the game, and the Queen Beast dissolves into an unknown white material that's later called Maso, which is what lets characters in the Drakengard universe do magic. That chemical is basically brought from that universe into our universe. Nothing really happens until about half a year later, where random people start to hear the Queen Bee's song inside of their head, and they're given a choice to either make a pact with this unknown entity, where, unlike in the Drakengard universe where it's with a magical creature and you're given incredible power in exchange for an aspect of yourself but you retain your humanity, here you just become a zombie-like being called Legion, or turn into salt. There's no in-between. Become a mindless slave, or just die. Which is a shit deal, I'm sure you can agree. The phenomenon had to be given a name in order to, explain to the citizens what's going on, and the explanation was this is a new disease called white chlorination syndrome, abbreviating to WCS where I can, because that's a long-ass name. It ended up with Shinjuku being just completely cut off from the rest of the world. I believe they constructed a big wall around it called the Wall of Jericho, which is one of the reports that I mentioned at the during Nier that you see that I mentioned near the start of the video. This worked for a while until the Wall of Jericho was destroyed in 2008, and that was because the Legion, who, like I mentioned, are just mindless zombies essentially, started performing coordinated attacks because they've been led by a being called Red Eye, which is a rare case of an intelligent form of Legion. And as the war waged on, it was eventually decided to go with the quite literal nuclear option to wipe out the Legion, and that did seem successful. The Legion there, including, and I believe including Red Eye, but I don't think it's ever confirmed, were wiped out, and because the nukes were dropped on Japan, in agreement with the Japanese government and the US, they had to make public Red Eye and Legion. And as far as everyone could tell, this was successful. It was not successful. About 2 years after the nuclear bombing of Japan, cases of WCS began just to pop up all around the world, not just in Japan now, so global research had to be conducted to combat the threat on Legion. But not just on them, it was also research conducted on Maso, WCS, and Angelus's body. However, at some point her body was stolen and the culprit was never found. As an aside, I personally like to headcanon Kaim is Red Eye and stole Angelus's body, but I don't think Red Eye can bring anyone back from the dead, and he was pretty goddamn dead by the end of Drakengard 1. So I don't think it's true, but that's my headcanon that I like to imagine. As the years go on, a breakthrough on delaying WCS was discovered in an enzyme called luciferase, which is a real thing. Look it up, this is real. I was sure this was a Nier term because it's called luciferase, it's kind of a dumb name, but no, this is a real enzyme in the real world. And it was discovered that it worked much better on children than it did adults, so an organization called the Hamlin Organization was created to round up kids, put a bunch of luciferase in them, and throw them at Legion. Exactly what happened to Emil and his sister. All the while this was going on, Project Gestalt was created and progressing in the background, and by the time of the intro to Nier, the Legion had mostly been wiped out, and a desperate Nier and Yona approached an alleged charity that was meant to hand out food and medicine so they could survive, as their parents were both killed during the time between the initial Shinjuku incident and the lead up to the original Nier. This was a front for Project Gestalt though, and they were given copies of Grimoire Noir to try and find someone who could survive without losing themselves and relapsing, which is the shades that we see at the start of the game. Nier catches on since all the people who he was with, aside from him and his sister, went berserk, and so he escapes with Yona, which leads to the events that we see at the start of the game, and is why the title of the introduction song, Snow and Summer, is so significant. It's not snow, it's the remains of those who didn't join the Queen Beast Pact. Due to Yona's negative reaction to touching the book, Nier does agree to become the organization's anchor for the project after we see him screaming for help at the start of the game, as he's the first successful Gestalt, but he doesn't do this for free. He does this on the condition that they save Yona. The project can only be completed though until Legion and Maso are completely eliminated, and this takes hundreds of years, and in the meantime replicants, who were the spare bodies that were created while the souls were ripped out of them as part of the original humans as part of Project Gestalt, so they could all be joined again. The replicants end up becoming sentient and having no clue about the origins of shades, or in other words Gestalts, just see them as monsters. All of this relied on Gestalt Nier's cooperation though, so after being led along for over 1,000 years, he takes matters into his own hands and tries to restore Yona himself, which is why he kidnaps replicant Yona. This is all information that is hard to glean, bar a few things from the game itself. This is all information that I've gathered through supplemental materials such as audio CDs and novels, things like that. And it's all really interesting. I'd really recommend giving it, checking it all out online. But like I mentioned at the start, if you want me to make a video on the supplemental material of Nier, I'd really be up for that, whether it's just about what happens in between the games or in Iceberg. And the audio drama in particular, I'd really recommend looking up because it gives you like a first-hand account of being a citizen in Japan when the Queen Beast descends onto the earth. And it's like really genuinely creepy, like hearing everyone, and like there's like this specific section that really sticks out in my mind of this kid crying for his mom while the Queen Bee song is just like blasting in the background. It's really, really effective. Like, yeah, I would say it's horror. It's really effective horror. I've thought this for ages, but like a fan-made kind of, I've seen like these fan-made analog horror projects all like throughout the last couple of years. One set in the Nier universe as all this is going on, or like as Legion's just breaking out, would be peak. I would love that. And hell, a game in the time between the Queen Beasts being launched into the real world and Nier Replicant would be sick too. I know there's Nier Reincarnation, which is a mobile game which kind of does this, but like a proper full game would be really cool. I also don't know a ton about Nier Reincarnation because I did not play it when it was active, and I think the last third of it was only in Japan, which is like the big stuff, I think. So yeah. And there's Sinnoh Alice, which has some important stuff, I believe. But again, I don't think that got released over here. And it's out of service now, so too bad. Even that was kind of just the cliff notes, though. So if I decide to dive into kind of the nitty-gritty of specific events between the ending of Drakengard 1 and Nier Replicant, that would probably be its own dedicated video, or maybe even an Iceberg. That is something I'm genuinely considering. So again, I'd love feedback on if you guys would want that. Anyway, back to the game. As we go up to the Lost Shrine, what sets the second playthrough apart becomes much clearer. We now know that the Shades are essentially the souls of humans with no body, and Kaine is partly possessed by one. We now hear what the Shades try to communicate, with the addition of Tehran's delightful, in air quotes, commentary, meaning the whole time, Kaine knew every word the Shades were saying and chose to keep quiet, and now we know too. As the group ascend up to the Lost Shrine, we see Gretel initially dismissive of the smaller Shades due to the loss of her other half, Hansel, as well as failing to keep Grimoire Weiss captured, yet feels superior to them. But they gradually warm up to each other, with her vowing to protect them with her life right as the group barge in for round 2. There's also an additional side quest. A particularly unhinged guard in the corner of the Northern Plains asks you to kill sheep or goats, as his wife was apparently kicked to death by a bunch of them. So you've got essentially this mini-game of riding the boar into them until you crash. It's pretty much just a way of farming cash as far as I can tell. Poor choice of words maybe, but it's there. Speaking of side quests, since I did most of them in my first run, I made the one with the bagman and his wife a priority. I forgot you get this added small scene of Nier and Weiss enjoying dinner with them and his wife as a thank you, and having done this just after the Father Nier mission, also I don't know if anyone said this, but it's always been my headcanon that Father Nier is actually the dad of Brother Nier and Yona, and he either left on his own journey or passed away not long after the mother. But it really made me think, Nier probably can't remember the last time he just sat down and had dinner as a family, hence the quiet but emotional reaction from him, and it's these kinds of tiny details that get me to really appreciate Nier as a story. There's no difference in the Forest of Myth, but for the Junkeep, we get the background of the small shade and the robot. It's obviously a child with its mother distracting some unknown figures that are out to get them so a child can escape. The robot, named P-33, wanders in on the sobbing shade, who seems to start to sympathise with it, and the pair soon become fast friends. And it's revealed soon after that it was purely the actions of Gideon that caused the accident that took Jacob's life, with the shade named Khalil even stating that they feel really bad for them and that the pair seem nice, making the events that follow all the more tragic, which is just the style for Nier, isn't it? I was worried I'd need to run through the whole of the Junkeep again, but if you have the memory alloy, you just have to run in and run back out, thankfully. I feel like I'd more than done my time there. You even get a little piece of added dialogue on Nier feeling like this is all familiar and Weiss just telling them to go with it. We also get the setup to P-33, now adorably nicknamed BP's desire to explore the world with his bestie, but we've got business at the Eyrie. Plus more of Taran making fun of Kaine's trauma because he's such a fucking bad boy who listens to music with swear words and stays up past his bedtime because he doesn't give a damn. Fuck Taran, all my homies hate Taran, he is the worst. But that is the point, he kind of has to be this caricature of an edgy caricature, but it's no wonder Kaine's fed up most of the time. I would be at my wit's end with his yapping. So don't worry about it, love. We get you. We get to hear more of the Shade's desire to coexist with humans, or replicants as we know them, but knowing Nier and Ko are on their way to slaughter them, they know that this isn't a realistic goal. And it's always made me wonder, how long have the citizens of the Eyrie been Shades for? Like, is that the reason why they never show themselves, because they are just Shades, or is this a recent development? I never quite understood. Things play out pretty similarly to last time, except after the destruction of the Eyrie, we get a flashback to Emil's past, him and his sister's mistreatment being turned into weapons, and him being forced to seal her away, and his worries of his incredible power hurting the people that he loves. The P-33 fight being pathetically easy makes so much more sense now we know it was entirely focused on protecting and escaping, only for the robot to end up alone and start to cry. God damn, man. To bring up an earlier point about Kaine, it does seem like here she was going to tell the group what the Shades were saying, but Nier's dead set belief that the only thing that matters is wiping them out makes her decide to back off. We've got my favourite section, the ship at seafront, and we get to watch the postman stumble across the Shade Girl, growing to care for her and giving her a name, Louise. He gives her food, tries to teach her how to write, sing, and is very accommodating to who he assumes is a shipwrecked kid. But As we know, Louise has been eating townspeople, hence the reason she has the red bag, and the fresh blood around the ship, explaining the time of the month comment he made to Kaine in Route A, which seemed like a little bit random. If replicants could actually have kids, I know the postman would have been an ace dad. Can we get a hell yeah for post dad? Thank you. Fun fact, you get an extra bit of dialogue if you did the side quest with the bad guy and his wife when interacting with the sink in the kitchen, with Nier deciding to invite them over for dinner sometime, just to twist the knife in the player that little bit more. As we're about to approach Louise, we finally get an explanation on why she's been eating people. The kindness the postman showed her has made her want to truly become human, so she reasons the more people she devours, the better she'll be able to maintain a human appearance to leave and live normally with him. In fact, I don't think it's a coincidence she's probably the clearest in terms of actually understanding what she's saying. One, she's, for my money, the second strongest shade next to the Shadow Lord, and her desire to being human runs so deep that it's literally what the symbols on her magic are saying. She's screaming, "I want to be a human being." Which is ironic considering as a shade, she's one of the only humans here. Emil's the only other exception, the rest of them aren't human. But something she says during the fight makes me wonder something that I thought about when I first played the game, but I never really managed to find a true answer. Where does Louise come from? We'll probably never know since the mystery adds to the story, but there seems to be a little bit of conflicting information. Is she a monster that was written about in a journal on the ship who just happened to come across this slave ship, slaughter everyone, and then happened to take on this form? Or was she in fact a slave that snapped from the abuse? As her timid nature towards the postman when first meeting him, despite being a powerful shade and her shouting that she never knew kindness before him and nobody's ever tried to help her. Either way, I think this is ultimately the best showcase of the most tragic and consistent theme in Nier: barriers between communication. Whether that barrier may be based in knowledge, like nobody knowing the true nature of shades until the very end of the game, verbal, since gestalts, shades, whatever you want to call them, and replicants are in an objective sense of the word, incapable of understanding one another bar very few exceptions. Since I was here, I decided to see what other dialogue was there when telling bad guy's wife what happened, but it's just way more cruel to do in my opinion. Her thinking he fell out of love and walking out on her and having her blame herself over it is just way worse than her knowing that he passed away, if you ask me. There's an additional scene afterwards with Kaine, having kept one of the letters Louise wrote, but instead of revealing the contents, she rips it up and walks off. We'll find out more about that later though. On the way to Facade for the king's wedding, we learn why wolves are hanging out in the desert. This used to be a forest that's now gone to ruin. However, the Shade Wolf at this point remains here as he believes this is his home and that he can coexist with humans, but some overzealous guards taking out a bunch of his pack unprompted in preparation for the wedding quickly manages to erode this trust. And obviously Fiora was blameless in this, which is why it's so sad that she ended up getting caught in the crossfire, but the wolves did have good reason to be outraged, let's be fair. At the end of the boss fight, we get a glimpse into the wolf's perspective in its final moments, thinking back to a human that had befriended it, likely from who it learned to trust inhumans before things turned for the worst, who it called grandfather before the wolf passes on. When walking back to the village, we have another brand new scene where Nier contemplates parting ways with the group, feeling it's unfair to drag them into what is sure to be such an intense fight, but the group is staying no matter what, putting him in his place the only way they can.
Are you truly worried about such a thing now, after all our merry little band has been through?
Hey, the fuck's this hot garbage you've been spewing?
Someone's been eavesdropping, eh?
Kaine, Emil, look, I just...
Wanted to leave us behind? Why, so we'd be safe? Fuck that.
Kaine's right. You accepted me. You told me we'd be together no matter what happens. Now it's time for us to return the favor.
Don't make me start talking about loyalty and debts and all that. You know I hate mushy shit.
But...
If it makes you feel better, we're not doing it for free. After we rescue Yona, we're totally gonna call in a favor of our own. We're going on a journey to cure Kaine's possession and restore my body. It's gonna be tons of fun. Just think of all the delicious local foods we can try along the way.
I'm gonna eat way more than my fair share. So you better get ready to pony up.
Thanks, you two. We're gonna rescue Yuna. I swear it.
So now we know what the Shades are saying. You remember those shade orbs in the castle? What the other Shades called their greatest treasure? They're babies. You're fighting literal babies, which is why the mother figure that turns into the boar is particularly enraged at you. I mean, fair fucks, this feels like that mission in Drakengard 1 all over again. It's during the boss fight that Tyran finally gets a dressing down and called out on being the little bitch boy he is. Moving on to after Emil's sacrifice, we get to see the aftermath of the massed people against the boar. With only the king left standing, the pair manage to take each other out, with him taking solace that he's going to be reunited with Freya soon. Plus, we get to know what the Shadow Lord's saying, and his thoughts are pretty much one-to-one with his replicant counterpart, that he'll finally see his sister again after so long. Ending B is much more focused on the Shadow Lord's perspective. With the loss of Yona, he just has nothing left to keep him going, hence the random patterns of energy and just him letting Replicant Nier take him out with little to no resistance. It cuts to the abandoned shopping mall from the very first few minutes of the game, and the young, original Nier and Yona doing their best to survive. He laments his failure to keep her safe in the afterlife, the Guardian Shades, Deviler and Popola's image behind him, until Yona comes to his side, thanking him for always looking out for her with his half of the cookie in hand, ending on what I'd call a bittersweet note. We're allowed a little bit of good news though. It turns out that Emil survived, crashing into the desert as solely ahead, hopping off to find a new body and his friends, all the while worrying about Kaine and Weiss being at each other's throats. You're given the final weapon you need to collect, the iron pipe from the start, and the other endings are now unlocked. Now, I've got to be honest, apart from one section which we'll get to, the playthrough to ending C feels rather redundant, having no differences bar a couple of cutscenes of Deviler and Popola that go into their motives in more detail, about them having lost track of the Shadow Lord and having Nier gather the relics to open the path to him as a last resort kind of option. This could have absolutely been included in the route to ending B, since the player obviously knows the twins' true intentions. The one section with meaningful differences I was talking about just now is none other than my favourite, the fight against Louise at Seafront. It begins with another cutscene of Deviler and Popola. They were totally aware of her as it turns out, and her desire to become human, opting to keep her around as a backup in case they couldn't get the Shadow Lord under control, all the while knowing her dreams of becoming human will never come true. Although ironically, her being more human than anyone there. And I'm unsure if this is genuinely the case or just a placebo on my part, but her dialogue sounds much clearer. The shade voice effects they use feel even more muted than last time. The fight goes a little differently. Instead of being overcome by her power and nearly losing if it wasn't for the postman, the group are able to stop her before she can pull off her near-fatal attack, allowing them to climb up her body for a small extra phase where they attack her, not like sea monster body, but the human body directly. In the aftermath, instead of Kaine ripping up the letter, she gives it to the postman who, despite knowing the atrocious things she's done, can't help but feel some parental affection for her. The letter simply reads, "Thank you." I'm unsure if this is the case for the other times, I genuinely can't remember, but a new addition is on the way back to Nia's village. Her theme, Fleeting Words, will play, but no shades will show up on your journey back. I personally like to imagine they're kind of paying their respects to her. Now, as much as I love this section, a full playthrough for it seems a bit excessive. I can see why they'd need to do another route for it, but they should have had it as the other relics are all collected and you start off in Seafront to minimise any tedium, in my opinion. Admittedly, the final scene added over the twins' clear hesitation confronting Nier is sweet. I'm glad to see that they did ultimately care for him, but they had to put their feelings aside for what they believe to be the greater good. By the way, unless you want to do another full playthrough with literally no differences, for the love of God, save your game at the Roof of the Lost Shrine. I mean it. We get context on how Emil managed to survive at the end, though As he starts to fade away, he has a flashback to one of his happiest memories, celebrating his birthday with his sister and the teacher that he saw as a motherly figure. But before he can pass on, his sister Halua calls out to him, telling him that she's always been with him and has been watching over him ever since they fused, and she gives up the last of her magic for her brother, wanting him to live happily, and reminding him that no matter what, she'll still always be with him. After the defeat of the Shadow Lord, Kaine reveals that she's on the verge of relapsing, resulting in one last fight with her. However, Tyran has been feeding off every single emotion she's felt, not just her negative ones, and this has caused him to have a somewhat change of heart, and in perhaps the only good deed he's ever done, he reaches out to Nier and gives him two choices to save Kaine: to stab her in the heart, or give up his existence in exchange for hers, so she can live as a normal human being. Ending sees the choice to kill Kaine, ending her suffering. With her last moments, the pair share a kiss where she manages to thank him before passing, with Nier picking up her Lunateer and declaring that they'll always be together. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but was this always going to happen when it did? When she walks off and says she's got personal shit to take care of in ending A, was she just gonna go find a quiet place, die and turn into a shade with Nier none the wiser? That's really dark if so. Ending D, after beating Kaine, involves Nier sacrificing himself in order to save her. Tyran explains that no one will remember him or any of his actions that have led up to this point. And I just want to... This isn't in the script, I've just thought of this actually. In one of the Emil flashbacks where he has to freeze his sister, there's like a particularly shitty scientist that's leading him around and like bossing him about and telling him what to do. Was that Tyran? Because we know in supplemental material that he did work for, like, I'm not sure if it was the Hamlin organization or one of, like, the adjacent ones, but he was involved in that. And I'm pretty sure he had Emil freeze things before. Was that him? Was he being a bastard or, like, to my boy, like, that long ago too? What a dick, man. Anyway, about Nier's sacrifice, the game beautifully visualizes this via the game mechanics. You have no choice but to watch as bit by bit, the items, menu, quest logs, everything we took for granted as just the user interface is slowly erased in front of our eyes until there's nothing left. After all's said and done, Kaine is woken up by Yona, who assumes she's the one who beat the Shadow Lord and saved her all on her own, and Kaine just simply nods her head and stands beside her, the pair watching the sun outside, with Kaine saying that she feels like she's found something special, ending Nier Replicant, leaving only a Lunateer on the main menu. The game really commits to this erasure thing too, with you being completely unable to use the name you initially picked for a new file. So, before we wrap up, like I did with the Drakengard videos before, I want to narrate my favourite weapon stories before we finish the video, so here we go. Lily Leaf Sword. A narrow sword once owned by a woman of such impossible beauty that men begged her to take their lives. I love him with all my heart, as he does me. When we cross paths outdoors, he sends signals with his eyes that only I can understand. He treasures my gifts so much, he keeps them locked away in a safe. Oh, I couldn't ask for a better lover. I can't believe this. My best friend deceived the love of my life and stole him from me. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone. All that remains are some of my gifts, which are scattered across his empty room. Everything else of value has been sold at the village marketplace. This will not stand. He hasn't abandoned me, he's just being tricked by that woman. I know he still has feelings for me, he must. I'm far more beautiful than she is, and he knows it. Oh yes, he knows. But I must make him see the truth, and quickly. I have to get her away from him. I have to kill her. Kill. Hurry up and kill. Consumed by her madness, the woman slaughtered the young husband and wife, hacking them with such force that the blade of her sword warped. The woman then went into hiding, leaving only clumps of unrecognizable meat and a sword with a horribly bent blade. But no matter how many smiths attempted to repair the sword, it never again retained its original shape. Rebirth. A unique sword with a round blade. Legend holds that it robs the wielder of his life force. That's right, this here's the weapon that'll be ending your life. Oh, don't sweat it, there's nothing to worry about. It'll be a pain the likes of which you've never felt before. In fact, you won't even feel pain at first. It'll be more like water sliding across your skin. Honestly, for most folks, it ain't the pain that makes them scream, it's the sight of their own blood flowing out of them. Yeah, it won't end so easy. See this part of the blade right here? This part hurts like a real son of a bitch. It's my favourite, which is why I always save it for last. I like to use it after people's voices get too hoarse and you can't tell what they're saying, which is a real... Fucking hell, are you ever loud? Mind piping down there? You're gonna make my hand slip. I won't kill you right away, so don't worry about a thing there, champ. I'm gonna take my sweet time before you finally give up the ghost. Honestly, you'd be surprised how much it takes to kill a person. I mean, think about it. People got 2 eyes, most of them anyway, and 2 ears, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 20 nails across the lot, and don't even get me started on joints, cause folks got hundreds of the damn things. Yeah, we got plenty of ways to keep ourselves entertained. Huh? Why am I doing this? Now ain't that a question? Buddy, I'm just doing what you've been doing for a good long while now, nabbing innocent citizens on fake charges, torturing them, and putting their severed heads on display. That ring any bells, buddy? It should, cause it was all you. Guess you forgot about all that, eh? Well, that's okay. I'll spend all the time it takes to make sure you remember every last thing you did to my wife and daughter. I like the twist that this is someone like taking their revenge in like an equally depraved way as the guy who took their wife and daughter's life. I didn't expect it, honestly. It was a good little twist to the story. Blade of Treachery. When a man who has lost his way wields this sword, the blade becomes blunt as wood. The sisters were puppets of complex machinery. So fine was their construction that any who laid eyes upon them assumed they were human in every way. They were the embodiment of man's greatest technological achievements. They walked like humans, ate like humans, laughed like humans. The only thing they could not do, however, was shed tears, for they were not designed that way. Because the sisters were machines, they felt nothing. Or they might mourn as humans did, but they experienced no true sadness, for they did not know what sadness was. Even when their friends perished in tragic accidents and their creator died of disease, they felt nothing. To the sisters, all it meant was that those people no longer existed. It was a warm spring's day when a lone cat wandered into their home. It was a scrawny, filthy thing, riddled with disease. What a bother, the sisters thought as they looked down at the wretched creature. But they fed it milk, wiped it clean, and kept it warm, and soon the cat was well again. From that day forth, it would linger wherever the sisters were, brushing against their legs when it wanted food. If it caught a mouse, it would bring it back to boast its prowess. If it wanted love, it would cry out to them in a mewling voice. It was a cold winter's day when the cat came into their house, let out a feeble squeak, and died. Time and again did the younger sister shake the cat's body. Time and again did the elder sister call out to it, but the cat neither moved nor responded. In that moment, the sisters felt as though they felt something break deep inside their chests, and from that day forth, they truly felt nothing at all. I have no proof of this aside from it being about mechanical sisters, but I'm like 70% sure this is about Deviler and Popola, and it tugs at the old heartstrings. Oh, and I looked it up after reading the story. Apparently in Japanese, the sword is literally called Deviler Popola, so there you go. Phoenix Dagger. A ceremonial blade crafted from feathers of the legendary firebird. It is untested as a weapon. There was once a woman who promised her hand to a man who was departing for the front. Devout by nature, she spent mornings, afternoons, and evenings in prayer for the safety of her beloved. Perhaps in response to her earnest pleas, one night a bird enveloped in light appeared to her in a dream and began to speak. "The man you love will surely return safely," said the bird in a beautiful voice. These words brought great comfort to the woman, and she began weeping tears of joy. "However," continued the bird, "his heart will surely not." Soon the man returned as the bird had foretold, his body covered in scars beyond counting, but as the bird had also foretold, he returned with an unfamiliar woman of extraordinary beauty at his side. Despite this, the pious woman could not contain her love for the man, and ran out to meet him as he approached. Surprised, the man embraced her, then collapsed to the ground. The pious woman stood over him, a bloody dagger in one hand and the ripe crimson fruit of his heart in the other. His heart will stray no longer, she whispered. Amidst the gathering pool of blood, her face awash with pure ecstasy, she placed a tender kiss on her beloved's heart and offered a prayer of gratitude. Fool's Embrace. A sword created after a man, driven mad by revenge, sealed away a cursed dragon. I was saved from the despair that shackled me. I was free from the fate that cursed me. I was pacified from the indignation that plagued me. I was changed by the day I met you. My flames will scorch the earth below. My fangs will know the taste of blood. My claws will rend my enemies asunder. My wings will soar through the skies above. If your eyes are to be robbed of their light, if your skin is to be stained with blood, if your sword is too heavy a burden, if your lips can no longer produce speech, even if this body is snuffed out, even if these words are stolen, until our contract is complete, until the moment this warmth is lost. This was absolutely written in Angelus's perspective, and no one can convince me otherwise. The weapon render even looks like her in flight in her initial form. So, I think that's proof, if anything. Iron Pipe. May 21st. We've finally run out of money. Food just costs a lot more nowadays because of the war. We tried begging at the church, but they have their hands full caring for the wounded and can't spare anything. Yona's really lost a lot of weight. I wish I could get her something to eat. July 15th. We met a nice lady who gave us some food. At first I thought she was homeless like us, but she said she was joining some kind of relief and support thing run by the government, so we decided to go with her. At least Yona seems to be doing okay today. August 1st. That nice lady from before used a book and turned into a monster. We ran away as fast as we could, but I don't think she's human anymore. Everything those adults told us was a lie. They won't give us money, and they won't treat Yona's illness. Also, there's a huge wall around the city now and we can't get out. We never should have come here. August 5th. It's so cold today. I can't believe it's summer. I can actually see my breath. We decided to hide from the monsters in an abandoned supermarket. I found a few old cans of food there, but now those are gone. Also, Yona's cough just won't quit. I've got a really bad feeling about this. I love this was written in Gestalt Nier's perspective. Getting a glimpse into their life before the events of the game is just super interesting. Vile Axe. A mage with a putrid soul imbued the essence of a fire lizard into this axe. The girl stares at the sight before her. Her father lies nearby, carved into pieces by countless blades. Her mother also lies dying, as well as her newborn baby brother. All had suffered terribly in their final moments, and the girl can do nothing but cry as she stares at the 3 soldiers who have murdered her only family. Years later, the girl reappears, her visage made strong by her vow for revenge. The first soldier has grown so fat that the buttons on his uniform can barely contain his girth. The girl approaches him and claims to know an easy way to lose weight. On the pretext of an examination, she has him lie down on a bed before suddenly hacking off his arms and legs with an axe. The remaining lump of a soldier screams and attempts to wriggle away, but the girl pins him down and tells him that he still has parts he can lose. Sometime later, the girl sits in front of the now rounded torso and smiles. "There we are," she whispers. "Look how nice and slim you are." The second soldier is a peerless Lothario? Each night, a new woman is invited to his manor to spend the night. The girl breaks into his home and kills the women at his side, then uses her axe to hack off his manhood as he trembles and begs for mercy. The third soldier has long since left the service, and is now living a quiet life with his family in a remote village. After they have fallen asleep, the girl takes her axe and cleaves the support beams of the house, causing it to collapse. She then sets fire to the wreckage, creating a great bonfire that can be seen for miles in all directions. Suddenly, the soldier's son crawls from the wreckage, covered from head to toe in terrible burns. As his eyes fall on the girl who has murdered his family, she hands him her axe and flees into the dark of night, never to be seen again. I enjoyed that the story focuses all around the seemingly endless cycle of revenge, and I think it's cool it's ambiguous if the girl just did this out of just purely seeking revenge, or if it's the actual acts, like, influencing her decisions. Because we know that some of these weapons are cursed, thanks to Drakengard 3, and the reason why the protagonists are able to hold them is because Accord gets rid of the curses on them somehow. So that ambiguity is cool, I like it. Fool's Lament, a weapon with a heroic dragon motif, used by a man who tried to save the world. Memoir, June 6, 2003, approximately 3 PM. A massive white humanoid, initially called the Weapon but since renamed the Giant, falls from the sky above Tokyo's Shinjuku ward, inflicting tremendous damage. At the time, a large red creature, henceforth referred to as the Dragon, appears and engages the Giant in combat, though both the nature of its attacks and their utility remain unclear. As the self-defense force contemplates method by which they might attack the target, the government establishes a Bureau of Emergency Countermeasures. Memoir, June 12, 2003, approximately 4 PM. The Giant, which was locked in combat with the Dragon, suddenly begins to collapse for reasons unknown. The Dragon is then shot down by the 6th Division, 303rd Squadron of the Air Self-Defense Force. No record exists of who issued the order to attack the Dragon. Work has begun to retrieve the remains of both the Giant and the Dragon, but no official verification has ever been made regarding which organization performed the retrieval. Memoir, December 2003. The first case of white chlorination syndrome is confirmed in Tokyo's Shinjuku ward. Memoir, July 2004. Humans continue to turn violent due to white chlorination syndrome, with fighting growing increasingly intense in infected regions. With the cause of the disease still unclear, the infected are isolated, and violent riots are suppressed by force. Main thoroughfares are sealed and rail transportation is halted, later leading to all of Shinjuku being sealed off. At this time, the prospects of asking the American military for non-official intervention is considered, but the government defers. Meanwhile, research begins on mesoparticles obtained from the Giant and the Dragon, as well as on countermeasures for white chlorination syndrome. This research ultimately leads to the founding of Project Gestalt a decade later. Anything that adds more information on the background lore of Nier is going to be a favourite of mine, and this is no exception. Transience. A knight was so moved by the suffering of a beggar that he removed all ornamentation from the spear. They were a frighteningly diligent people. They would clear forests and hunt animals even when they had no need. They developed techniques to preserve food they were unable to eat, and earned more money than could ever be spent. Yet there was not a single one among them who did not accept these practices, for none knew of any other customs. They were a frighteningly studious people. Their grasp of calculation and science exceed any pretense of practicality, and they would repeatedly engage in spirited debates regarding predictions of the future. They invented an increasingly difficult language and created an infinite series of complex machines, which they would immediately discard. But there was not a single one among them who looked back, for none knew of any reason for concern. They were frighteningly obedient people. Without ever being told, they would greet the morning sun at the same time in the same clothes, while toiling away in the same cramped rooms. Yet there was not a single one among them who complained, for none knew what else they should be doing. Having worked far too much, the people lost their forests and took to living atop the sand. Having grown far too intelligent, the people conversed in a language that no other peoples could comprehend. Having grown far too well behaved, the people who were unable to defy the laws that would be established one after the other, and came to live their lives enclosed by tens of thousands of rules. I believe this is written in the perspective of the Shade Wolf quietly watching the kingdom of Assad develop. It's quite fascinating, I'm a big fan. And lastly, Fool's Accord. A lance birthed as part of a pact with an ancient red dragon. This is the story of a sorrowful prince, a tale of a kingdom in a time long past. Attacked by the forces of darkness, the nation was annihilated in a single night by inhuman soldiers with red eyes and a group of black dragons so numerous they blotted out the sky. Having infiltrated the king's castle, the black dragons visited upon the king and queen a most horrible fate. It is said that their stomachs were torn open by the black dragon's mighty claws, and the very floor they stood upon became a sea of blood. The prince and princess, though racked with sorrow, escaped to live another day. The prince, spared by the shock of witnessing his parents' tragic end, became consumed by a desire to exact vengeance. This is the story of a terrifying prince, a history of conflict in the long ago. Obsessed with laying low his hated enemies, the prince indulges in his vengeance day after day after day. Even when faced with foes who take heel, he chases them down and tears them apart from groin to gullet. The carnage is so horrific, his fellow soldiers whisper tales of how they saw him mutilating bodies that are already long dead. Perhaps because no commander can control him, the prince is sent to an even harsher battle. This is the story of a fooled prince, the whereabouts of fate in the long ago. The prince's next battleground is a castle that guards a goddess. He lays waste to all before him, hacking arms, cleaving legs, rending stomachs, gouging eyes, separating heads from shoulders. But soon the injured prince can no longer tell the difference between the blood that rains down and that which comes from his own wounds, and he collapses in a heap. As he writhes in pain, coughing up gouts of hot blood, he lifts his gaze and sees a hated dragon standing before him. This is the story of a mad prince, a meeting with a dragon in the long ago. An injured red dragon stands before the prince, and though it is a different colour than the beasts that killed his parents, he feels the need to avenge himself upon it regardless. But as he raises his sword, the dragon says, "In exchange for both our souls, human, I will save your life and grant you power." After some thought, the prince makes the pact. It matters not to him what he might lose in the deal, or that it involves a dragon. All he cares about is that he can continue swinging his blade. So he swings and swings and swings, and with each blow his heart fills with a desire as black as the deepest night. Fitting that we end on a weapon story centered around Kaim as an explanation for the scattered weapons in Nier and why some of them appeared in Drakengard, is his weapons were spread around the nation when he was shot down at the end of Drakengard's final ending. So I might have told a little porky. In the original release of Nier, Ending D was the end. You give up everything in order to save Kaine. However, for the Replicant Remaster, creating a new save file and playing up to the point of recruiting Kaine in the area after beating Hook will play a cutscene of Kaine suddenly jolting up from a bad dream, enough to make her cry. The game has skipped 3 years ahead, and as far as she knows, she stormed into the Shadow Lord's castle, beat him, and rescued Yona, but she can't get over the strange feeling that something is missing. Something she just can't put her finger on, so she decides to go out and slaughter some shades to distract herself. Also, I had to do this.
Alright, fuck off and die, you pervy little shit! Creepy bastard must have a death wish or something.
This edition isn't something entirely new to this game, though. This was actually an adaptation of a story found in a book that was sold named Grimoire Nier, and fun fact, I actually owned the updated revised version released around the same time as the remaster. It isn't a one-to-one recreation of said story though, it has some pretty stark differences that I'll go over, and I've gotta say, I love that her big technique names feel like someone went up to Kaine the character and asked her what her strongest attacks were, and she said, I don't know, big fuck off slash. I just hit things and they die. Like, she just came up with that on the spot, and that's very funny to me. It doesn't take long for her to find a guard who is intending to check in on the people living at the Forest of Myth, as no one's heard from them in a while, so Kaine decides to volunteer since he clearly can't handle the increase in shades. Plus, they're a lot more aggressive than they were at like the start of the game, and this is because of Nier's, or well, what Kaine believes her actions are in killing the Shadow Lord, because he was the anchor of Project Gestalt. All Gestalts are gonna relapse at some point, and with no Gestalt to return into the Replicant, all Replicants are gonna get the Black Scroll, so kind of on a fast track to extinction for both Gestalts and Replicants. So well done, Nier, for leaving that in Kaine's lap, good job. This point of the game does really well to showcase the slow but steady decay of the world after the events of Ending D. Shades are everywhere, the Aery's gone, the Junk is closed off due to a dramatic increase in robots, and the only place that seems alright is what was named Nier's Village. Now, because of his actions, it's just called Yona's Village. But without Deviler and Popola to guide them, who knows how long that's gonna be. Plus, we don't even get to see the Kingdom of Facade or Seafront, but with its ruler dead and the former likely to see a similar fate to the village, it's not a good sign all around. When Kaine gets to the forest, she finds the citizens dead, with dozens of robots pouring from the divine tree responsible for the carnage. Kaine enters, and the deeper she travels in, the more two disembodied voices tell her of the tree's nature, essentially being a gigantic database meant to resemble a tree for the purpose of collecting data, Kaine included. They talk about her being responsible for the failure of Project Gestalt with the original, the Shadow Lord, slain. Like I mentioned before, the actions taken over the course of the game have effectively, if it wasn't obvious already, guaranteed the extinction of humanity. The deeper she goes, the more the natural appearance gives way to mechanical tunnels, and eventually two beings greet Kaine. These robotic children are the administrators, but Kaine doesn't give a shit and cuts them down, only for them to repair themselves, resulting in a fight. These are the biggest additions to this storyline, meant to mimic the appearance of 2B and 9S from the 2017 Nier Automata. There was only one administrator originally in the Lost World story, and 2B and Nier Automata by extension wasn't even a twinkle in Yoko Taro's wank bank yet, so clearly these are new additions, but I imagine they were included to give Nier more direct ties to the Breakout sequel. They soon pit her against robotic copies of herself at the peak of her power, and I love Kaine's expression here. She just looks so confused with what's happening, but she takes everything in her stride considering.
God damn, you're annoying! I want to tear these freaks apart, eat the pieces, and shit them into a trash can!
No matter how many she beats, more of them just keep coming. That is until none other than our boy Emil comes in clutch, packing a new body and a whole bunch of arms. The twins seem to know everything about him too, but Kaine brings him up to speed pretty swiftly.
Number 7. Forged by humans. Being who absorbed the power of number 6 and transcended humanity.
Who is that? What are those voices?
Just a couple of little fucks.
The pair move on into this area made of the same kind of blocky structures seen in the copied world of Nier Automata fame, and this might be me looking too much into things, but the birdcage-esque constructs might be referencing the mobile game Nier Reincarnation, since that takes place in an area literally called the Cage, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if this remaster was made when Reincarnation was being developed. I don't know. I know it released later. As the pair push on, bits and pieces of their memories are starting to return, until Kaine is pulled into an even deeper world of data, the HUD now fully mimicking the one seen in Nier Automata as twins continue to just talk at Kaine, being pretty antagonistic, going out of their way to remind her that Shades are the true humans that were being cut down as she took her journey, and that she, as a replicant, is an entity that by all accounts doesn't belong in the world. The twins then decide to pry out her worst memories, the trauma of Hook, the abuse inflicted by everyone around her. Everything seems lost until she begins to fade and awaken the Aery? Back with her grandma? But this reunion is horribly brief, taking almost no time at all to rip even this fake happy scenario away from her. Everyone disintegrating into ash, which I'm not sure, but I think might be some sort of recreation of a similar scenario that would have happened soon after the Tokyo Tower incident, the description sounding eerily similar to what would happen when people turn into salt. Kaine seems to be about to suffer the same fate, until a familiar, pompous voice calls her back from the brink. Grimoire Weiss isn't about to let one of his companions fall so easily, so the pair team up to take down the reconstructed Shade.
Do you still not remember?
When you think about it, although it obviously was with the best of intentions, Kaine didn't really get much of a say about the whole exchanging Nier's life for hers thing, so she puts her feelings about it better than I ever could.
This is a replicant's potential.
Don't go. Gotta go back. Don't go.
Shut up, shut up! I already made up my mind. Nobody tells me what to do. I swore I would be a sword. I swore that I would be your sword. Do you hear me? So I am going to get you back, and I don't care what it takes. Who the fuck do you think you are to just up and disappear like that, huh? I'm the one who gets to decide what my life means to me. It's my life, and I'll do whatever I want with it. So quit wasting time like a brainless fuckwit and get your ass back here now!
After all's said and done, an absolute unit of a flower spouts up from the ground, and anyone with any knowledge of Drakengard will be extremely worried like I was, but Emil floats up to the top and we find Kaine in the centre, holding the young version of Nier, brought back, resolving to live together with the people they cherish, regardless of the consequences. Speaking of the flower and things relating to it, the administrators brought up a specific word when referring to Kaine: singularity. Like Zero before her, Kaine seemingly has the ability to alter the course of established timelines from sheer force of will. Hell, there being 2 administrators here with Kaine seemingly killing one of them, bringing the number back down to 1, like in the original story, might be some example of this. And the administrator story continues in Grimoire Nier's revised edition, and kind of soft confirms, along with Nier Reincarnation, that the whole series is a weird time loop, but that's way too much for me to get into for this video. Some people might view this ending as a cop-out, and as much as I love Ending D, and I do, it's part of why Nier was originally considered a cult classic, it's meaningful and iconic, I have to disagree with the view that this new ending is a cop-out. I see it all about agency. As someone who's had to clutch onto any bit of happiness tightly, there's no better character than Kaine to decide to grab onto something that brings her joy on her own terms, regardless of what anyone in-game and outside the fourth wall has to say about it. If you go back to a file that has adult Nier after everything's restored, going back to Kaine's home will result in a little surprise. One last weapon, one of Kaine's swords for Nier to wield, and since we've just got it, I want to narrate the weapon story for Kaine's sword. A sword wielded by a woman who loved killing. There were originally 2, but one broke in the midst of a fierce battle. She fears the pain, the suffering, the sadness of losing those she cherishes. However faint, that feeling alone remained with her. She fights. Her swordsmanship is so violent, it wards off sorrow itself. Nothing can stop her vengeful blade from its grim work, not even the fountains of blood that cloud her vision. She dreams, the darkness sings to her of solitude and despair, but she resists, time and again, never breaking. She presses on. Even if the future that awaits her has no meaning, she presses on, because this is the world with... Plus, there's an adorable little extra credit scene. These don't happen enough in games nowadays, and it just made me smile with no strings attached, which is rare for a Yoko Taro game, so you gotta cherish it where you can find it. Nier Replicant isn't a perfect game. Some of the quests can be admittedly generic or tedious, and I made my opinion about the roads to endings past B very clear. And it doesn't have that polished to a sheen combat that Platinum Games managed to create with Automata. But this is a game that, in my view, you can just feel the love, passion, and heart in every piece of it. The story, the characters, it all just hits on a deeply personal level for me. And that's why Nier Replicant will always be my favourite game Yoko Taro has ever created, and one of my favourite games ever made. And that's going to end it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I will be making a video on Nier Automata at some point in the future, I just don't know when, but I would still like to explore Nier slash Drakengard kind of content and make stuff around it, so please leave suggestions on what I could do. Like, I'm really considering making an iceberg, like, about Nier and Drakengard and the background lore and, like, the supplemental material. I did not get into nearly as much supplemental stuff as there is, because there is a lot. There is a hell of a lot. And that might be interesting to explore. So, I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.